Hi, everyone. Welcome to LogRocket September webinar. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes so we can get all the attendees in here, and we'll be getting started in about 90 seconds or so. Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome to LogRocket September webinar. Today, we are excited to have Chris Stasonis and Cliff Delsoin join us to discuss how Lola's new definition of done brings consistency to feature releases. In addition, we will also be joined by LogRocket's co-founder, Ben Edelstein. Before we begin, I would like to let you know that a link to the recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to all participants. You will also be able to find it at logrocket.com. At the conclusion of the webinar, we will have a question and answer session with Chris and Cliff. If you have a question, please add it to the chat. All questions will be answered in the order they are received. If for some reason we don't address your question by the end of the session, please contact us at LogRocket on Twitter or reply to the email for this webinar. I'll be happy to get you a response to any unanswered question that you have. So for everybody who's still rolling in and joining, welcome. Now, before we get to Chris and Cliff, I'd like to introduce Ben Edelstein, co-founder of LogRocket, to quickly introduce our new issue management feature. This is currently available in beta, and if you don't have access and would like access, please just reply to the email for this webinar and we will get you involved. So Ben?
Hey, all set, you can hear me?
Can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Hey everyone. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Oops, where's the Zoom? There we go. Yeah, so I'm Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of LogRocket, and today I'm going to talk about our new issue management feature. And on the surface, issue management is a redesign of what used to be our errors tab, but it's really more than just a design refresh. Issue management is a new abstraction that brings together the whole gamut of problems that affect users, including JavaScript errors, but also performance issues and network errors and UX issues. And it's in an easy-to-use UI that helps you cut through the noise and triage and address the issues that are having the greatest impact on your application health and product experience. So let's take a look here, and I'm going to scroll down and come back to this graph in a little while. And what I want to start by doing is looking here at the high impact issues. So these are issues that either LogRocket has automatically categorized as having a high impact on your customers, or things that have been manually tagged by a member of your team. And then here are the issues that need triage. So these are new issues that recently popped up, and maybe LogRocket sent an alert, or you come in here in the morning each day and you see these are issues that need to be triaged. So let's go through the process of doing that. When I click into one of these issues, the first thing I see is some basic information about like what user it affected, where this user was and what browser they were using. Here are some aggregate statistics on like what browsers this happens in and what pages in your app it happens on. This was a JavaScript error, so we see the stack trace, which shows us which line in your code. And this is like original source code, so we can take your deminified stack traces. And then the most important part of the report here is the video. And this is a LogRocket replay, and in the video, it shows you what does this issue actually look like to the end user, which is critical because at the end of the day, what matters is what the user saw and how an error affected the user. And by watching the video, you can quickly get an understanding of whether something was kind of a nuisance, but didn't really affect the user from doing what they wanted to do, or whether it was actually a critical issue that prevented the user from checking out in the shopping cart, and something that's really hurting your business and something that needs to be addressed. And once you make that determination, you can come up here and change the status. And from watching this video, kind of looked like something that didn't affect the user. So I'm going to say, let's ignore it. And I can then set a rule that tells LogRocket that for all future issues like this, they can be ignored. And I think about this a lot like kind of an inbox in email. So in Gmail, we can set up rules that say certain emails go into the important folder, certain emails go into subfolders, and certain emails go straight to archive. And it's kind of the same idea with issues. You know, you have issues constantly being alerted based on errors, network errors, performance issues, UX issues. And LogRocket is constantly surfacing issues, and over time, by creating rules, LogRocket gains an understanding of what's important, what are things that are high impact, what are things that are low impact, so that this can really just show you the relevant issues where you can fix them and then improve your application. And that's what this graph is showing. It's showing over time what percentage of sessions have an issue, what percentage of sessions have no issue. And you know, it's interesting, we dog food our own product. We've been using issue management for a while now. And it's been really helpful for our team to rally around striving for, we aim for 95% no issue sessions. So, you know, we have a alerting set up, and we, you know, the engineering team works to quickly fix high impact issues that are causing a larger number of our users to have problems. And this has helped give us a lot of confidence that we're delivering a great experience to our users. But issue management, this is, you know, what I showed today is just one of the many ways LogRocket can help you enhance your web experience. And if you'd like to learn more, you can visit logrocket.com or just reply to the email you got about the webinar. And we'd be happy to show you more. So now I'm really excited to introduce Chris and Cliff from Lola, who have a great presentation prepared on adding consistency to feature releases.
Let me just share my screen here once I find the right one. 1 second here. Great, can everyone see this? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Chris, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Lola's approach to what we're calling the definition of done, and really understanding how that impacts things from a lens of quality and consistency across our releases, and talk a little bit about some of the things we've done and some of the tools we're using in order to make sure that we do have quality releases on a pretty regular cadence. As mentioned, my name is Chris Stasonis. I'm the VP of Engineering at Lola.com. I've been with Lola for just about 1.5 years at this point. Seen a lot of change in that time. I'll turn it over to Cliff for a second to introduce himself and tell you a little about his role as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Cliff Delsoin. I'm a software engineer at Lola.com. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years now. I work on the service team. And the reason that's important is our service team builds internal tools that enables our customer service agents with the purpose of lowering costs and increasing the speed of our customer service agents. And one of our more invaluable tools is LogRocket that we use to make sure that we're constantly lowering cost and increasing speed.
Right. Thanks, Cliff. So I'll start with just a little bit about what Lola is. So we refer to ourselves as an agile travel management company, and really what it is about managing travel of employees within a company and servicing a couple of different customers within that company, and making sure that all their needs are met. We had a tagline at some point, which was basically business travel that doesn't suck, and that's really what we're trying to get at. I don't know how many folks on the line have done a lot of business travel versus personal travel. The first customer we're kind of serving within the business is the person who's doing the traveling, the employee that just wants to be able to quickly book a trip, quickly be able to find their travel information, and all the things you've probably come to expect with booking personal travel on a consumer grade site, where everything feels relatively easy, you can find everything you need. So that's kind of our first customer. And I can tell you from experience, at least from a previous job where I did a fair amount of business travel, and I won't name the vendor we were using at the time, Booking travel became a skill set that I had because I really needed to know how to use that tool. And that's not a skill set we should require employees to have. It should be easy to do this. The second piece of this is about managing, and this is really where another customer group within the company comes in, which is the finance group in the travel admins, which is really about what is your policy around travel. Can I book a first class ticket to London just for fun? Is there price restrictions? Am I allowed to stay in 5-star hotels? Am I allowed to travel at all? All those things are something that the travel manager can easily do within Lola. And then reporting is another piece of this, also affecting finance, which is really about how am I spending my money? Is engineering spending my entire travel budget? Is sales on track for where they're going to be, where they were intended to be? Are they going over? Are there particular people who are breaking policy more frequently than others? So just having real insight into that. And then there's another big piece of this, which is really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about later, which is duty of care, which is really about the company's responsibility to take care of an employee when they are traveling on the company's behalf. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because it definitely comes up with the world that we're in now, and with travel being in the state it is, like that becomes a much more important feature. But we'll touch on that in a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to Cliff to talk a little bit about the tech side of things at Lola.
Sure. So just a quick overview of our tech stack. We're mainly a React and Python shop. We have repos in different languages, but mostly React on the front end, Python on the back end. Our mobile application is a React app wrapped in React WebView, React Native WebView. Our back end is, our database is Postgres along with Elasticsearch. We use Elasticsearch for like a high-powered search engine to find, cities and hotel names fairly quickly. We host everything through AWS and along with other AWS services, along with Kubernetes for containerization. And we use Jenkins for deployment. Another layer of this, because we are a travel company, is our use of GDSs, which are programs that we use and integrate with in order to get our travel content, right? Our hotels, our flights, we don't create those. They have to come from somewhere. That layer is actually really important and difficult to manage sometimes, right? Because since we're not in control of that content, we need to be able to reproduce bugs we need to be able to reproduce bugs based on this content that we're not fully in control of. And the best way to do that is through LogRocket and viewing exactly what our users are experiencing. That's about it.
Yeah, so Cliff kind of touched on this, but quality can be complex at our company. And when I joined about like I said, a year and a half ago, it was pretty clear that we needed to put a pretty big focus on quality and consistency of releases. Historically, Lola had a fairly monolithic architecture. We actually had 2 monoliths. My favorite term for that is the distributed monolith. They're effectively one application that just happened to live in 2 different repos and get hosted in 2 different ways, but they were really tightly coupled. So we've put a big focus on consistency and quality throughout the last year, including growing a QE team and then really thinking about what it means to complete a project, which is what we're going to get into with the definition of done. And we've introduced a whole bunch of tools. LogRocket has become really critical, and I'll talk to you about how that fits into our definition of done. And then a lot of the standard stuff around having Jira, having a good flow around how tickets, when bugs are found, how do they end up in our system, things like that. Part of our move towards quality is really about continuous deployment. And to me, continuous deployment is the journey is more important than the destination to some degree. So why I wanted us to get to continuous deployment had more to do with all of the discipline it required to get to that point, right? If you have continuous deployment, it hopefully means that you've got really solid automated testing. You've got really stable pre-production environments. And then a lot of people think about continuous deployment and the steps to get up to the point of getting something out the door. But really, I don't think it ends there. Continuous deployment also means that after it gets to production, you've got the tools you need to understand the state of the world in production. LogRocket is certainly one of those tools that we use, but also just the monitoring, alerting. We're using a lot of other tools on the back end to pick up bugs in the back end, or just monitor for like scrape through our logs, lots of other things to pull information out and give us real-time insight into what the state of our application is. Which kind of brings us to the definition of done. I think it's particularly in the world we're in, where I think all of us have kind of suddenly up and gone remote. Words matter a lot more. How you communicate matters a lot more. It's a lot harder than when you could just walk over to someone's desk and just chat about something. So sharing a common vocabulary about things is really important. So we started talking about what does it mean for a project to be done? And it seems like that should be obvious, but I don't think we all share the exact same definition. And really what it came down to is understanding when we're launching a new feature or a new product, what does that mean? What do we want to have for monitoring and alerting in place? What do we need with regards to testing and automation? Another side of this is, when we release new features, Cliff is going to talk a little bit more about the role of our support agents, but have we trained our support agents? If we launch a new feature and all of a sudden customers start calling in about it, that can be a really bad experience for our users. So making sure that we've trained our support agents. And then another piece we added in here, Cliff was alluding to this, but there are many things, because of our reliance on these third parties for all of our travel content, that are, I don't want to say impossible, but we'll say really difficult to test in pre-production. We're layering our sandbox on top of someone else's sandbox, which may have another sandbox underneath it. And that whole chain is really unpredictable. So there are some things that we can, unfortunately, only really repeat in production. So one of the things we added into our definition of done was, you're not done until you have witnessed a customer use this feature successfully. And the mechanism by which we do that is LogRocket. For most features, if we've got some backend features, we will also, dig into logs that come from there. But LogRocket's been an invaluable tool for us to be able to actually watch a user use something. And we both learn whether the feature works, and we also gain a lot of insight into just, did the customer use it the way we thought they would? Are things not obvious? It's both an engineering tool in the sense that we are understanding errors, and it's a product tool in the sense that we can really research how our customers are actually using the tools that we've created. I'll turn it over to Cliff again to talk a little about kind of how service fits into the bigger picture of Lola.
Yeah, so our service team is our backbone. We call them Wombats. Our service team, the Wombats, I'll just back up and tell a little funny story. The reason that we named them the Wombats is a group of Wombats is called a Wisdom. An old employee coined the name for the team, and it's stuck. And now we're a group of Wombats as customer service agents. And because I'm an engineer that services their team, I'm a Womgineer. But just going, Wombats are critical to our mission. They are our tech support and our travel agents. When everything goes to hell, right? Everything breaks down, we have a crazy product outage, we can rely on our Wombats to step up and help our customers when, our product has broken in any kind of way. Our team is 100% on site and very close-knit. So a funny story, not a funny story, but just an example of how useful our team has been and how helpful our team has been to our customers and how much of a value add it's been. In COVID, all travel has pretty much ceased, right? And airports closed down, and we had hundreds of flights and hotel bookings pending, and our customers called, and one particular customer had 70 flights that they needed to cancel. And if it weren't for our wombats, they would have to cancel those one by one themselves. But our wombat team took that, and with one phone call, this customer was able to cancel 70 flights, and our wombats just handled it for them. And a fun fact about our experience with COVID, it wasn't only one customer that experienced this. We tallied a total of over $1 million worth of flight credits, which happens when flights are canceled and people receive credits and are allowed to book later. $1 million of flights our wombats handled in the last 6 to 8 months, which is really impressive. And I don't know where Lola would be without them, honestly. Next slide. So an example of how our wombats use LogRocket. Our wombats are tech support and travel agents. So if a customer is having any issues with the app, in this example, this customer was trying to book a flight, and for some reason the book button was disabled. They can't figure it out why, so they reach out to our customer service team. Now, our first step for our wombat is to figure out what's causing this. Is this user error or is this a bug? Usually the only way to figure this out is to have a conversation with the user, right? And hopefully they give you the right information. But with LogRocket, we don't even have to waste time doing that. We can just go right into the app, view their session, and see exactly what our user did and how the wombat can service it. In this case, this was a real bug, a critical bug too, right? We are a travel app, and if people can't book, then it is something that we have to drop everything for and try to solve. So within a few minutes, our wombat was able to find out exactly what was going on, or at least point us into the direction of what was going on. And because they are also tech support and travel agents, even though the app failed our customer, our wombat stepped up. Our wombat was able to book outside of the app, make sure our customer got what they needed. And then they brought the bug to our engineers, in which we also watched the LogRocket session. We view the errors that came up, and we were able to solve that within an hour. So LogRocket was an invaluable tool in that process, and also our wombats are invaluable to the company. They make a great team together.
So I'll talk a little bit about the future of travel management here and where we see travel going and how our product is probably going to evolve. So no surprise to anyone, travel's been decimated in the last 6 months. And there's, a million guesses on what it's going to look like and when it's going to come back and everything. But I think what we're looking at right now is about an 80% drop in travel since the beginning of the year. And I don't have the exact numbers, and we're starting to see it trickle back a little bit, but it's going to be a while. There's tons of guesses. Our internal guess that I think we mostly run with is that travel will maybe return to 2019 levels, which was a peak, probably in 2022. So we've got another 18 months, 17 months to ride this out. But I think one of the things that the pandemic and this disruption to travel has really highlighted is kind of something partly of what Cliff talked about, right? Is that disruption management is hugely important. And it could be a pandemic, that's kind of the worst case scenario, but it can also be a blizzard in Denver or a million other things where really travel, like the support, the tools that we provide, and I talked a little bit about duty of care earlier, I'll kind of blend that in here. Duty of care is the legal obligation that a company has to make sure that its employees are taken care of while out on the road for the company. For instance, right, if Cliff flew out to California for a trip and then his flight got canceled on the way home and he's going to have to stay there for 2 more days, I as a company have an obligation to care for Cliff and get him another hotel room and pay for all that. that's on the company, not on Cliff. So the tools that we provide around that are hugely important, and we've grown out our duty of care tool. So how does a company know where its employees are at any given point? Like a much more like tragic example of this would be if, hey, there's an earthquake in California, I want to go look and see if any of my employees are in California. Those tools will be really important. Cliff also mentioned the idea of travel credits as part of something that we accrued a lot of in the course of the last 6 months. There are no good tools. Every airline does this a little differently to keep track of travel credits. They don't generally surface it in their sites. You have to call to get to use them. So there's a lot of value add that we're going to have in terms of managing these travel credits for users. We've built a tool so companies can see everything they've got in the books going forward, and make it easier for them to rebook using those travel credits in the future. But I think the thing that we're expecting, right, is that business travel, it's going to come back. It's probably going to look a lot different than it used to be. I think if this pandemic has done anything, it's probably made us, all companies, question the value of like, okay, how much in-person time do I need? Do we need an office? Do we need to send our salespeople on the road for, a week every month to go do this? I think that all those questions aren't answered yet, but I expect that business travel will look a lot different. And I think that flexibility in travel will be super important. I think there will be a lot more disruption management, or just in general, people want to change their plans, and having a tool set around that is going to be really important for the travel management business. And that's something that we're investing a lot of time into now, just making sure that aside from booking travel, how do you deal with it when plans change, whether it's because you want them to change or because something is changing them on your behalf. So that's where we're spending a lot of our time, and we're all, crossing our fingers that we can all get on planes again sometime soon, but we think it's still going to be a while before the market really recovers. And then I'm just going to kind of bring it back to kind of close this out, and then we'll shift over to questions. But quality is hugely important to us as a business. It is really important that a customer experience is really great. And I talked about it earlier, but an engineering team, understanding that, particularly when that team is distributed, understanding what it means, what quality means, how we go about achieving it, and what it means to actually complete a project is really important. And that includes all parts of the business, engineering, the QE team, obviously the support team we talked about, but you can even stretch this out to marketing, right? Like there's often times where when we're releasing a new feature, we need to coordinate that work with the marketing team so they can do PR around it or anything like that. So we put a lot of effort into redefining this and making sure that we are pulling in the right people that need to know about projects, that we're kind of never be done with this, but fine-tuning our communication channels as much as we can to make sure everyone's on the same page. And that's really about what this is about. How do we share a common vocabulary that gets us to build a product that is really high quality? We're seeing consistency with releases, and really gives us the ability to just incrementally improve, right? We're never while we want consistent releases, we're always going to fail on something, but how do we make sure that we can do better the next time? How can we quickly respond to failure, and make sure that we don't repeat those same mistakes again? So that's, I think, all I've got, but happy to take any questions people have.
Thanks, guys. That was great. So we have one question in the chat. I guess if we can go back to the definition of done and maybe drill into that a little further, if you guys want to give an example of maybe, why, or I know we went over sort of why you want to see a customer use it, but can you maybe walk through some more like step-by-step, be a little bit more, I guess, like detailed into it?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, I can tell you a little about why we want to see a customer see this step by step, and then Cliff.
And I guess clarifier just came in. Maybe like what could someone do to kind of adjust their definition of done based on your experience? So what have you guys learned, and what kind of recommendations do you have?
Yeah, I mean, what we learned is, I think that particularly as when I came on board and I was trying to push towards continuous deployment, I think I had a picture in my head of what that kind of meant, but I don't think that was shared across the team, and particularly with most teams, right? You've got a variety of experience levels. Some people have been working for 10 years and may have done the same problem set before, and some people are much earlier in their careers and haven't seen continuous deployment, or people have just worked at we'll say kind of more traditional, slower cycle releases. So this is about really just trying to have a conversation with a leadership group within the organization to say, what are the things that we all think are really important with the release? And really drilling on what does monitoring alerting actually mean? Like how do we want to define observability? And I said earlier, a lot of continuous deployment was almost more about the journey than the destination. That was partially the same thing with definition of done. It is about the discussion you have that leads to the definition that can be really important. The definition is important as well, but like the conversations you'll have of just trying to make sure you're all on the same page and how you'll shift your own definition are really important. I really press on the fact that on the training of outside organizations, I think not to give engineers a bad name, I have historically been a software engineer. They don't let me write code anymore, but it's very easy to be like, all right, I wrote my code, see ya, I'm done. And not remember that there's a whole lot of downstream implications of that. So really focusing on what that means. I think there's also a lot of things it's worth talking about in terms of SLA, like what is the response if this thing breaks? Is this, I think something that goes hand in hand with the definition of done is also your understanding of what is a critical bug. And by critical bug, we have written a definition for this as well. A critical bug is something that I will page Cliff at 2 a.m. to fix. And I don't like to page Cliff. So I want to make sure that we have a pretty high bar there and that we have a shared understanding that, yeah, if booking is broken, we will page Cliff. But if there's this one report that's broken, that can wait until tomorrow. So I think in addition to definition, those two things come pretty close together, because if something is a critical bug, you definitely want to have monitoring and alerting of it. You want to be able to identify those issues as early as possible. And I think I could go on for a while, but the last thing I'll say is one of the core engineering values we have that we aspire to is that we know first. And what that really means is we know about the bugs before customer support or before the CSMs are taking those calls and hearing about it. We know about it before anybody else, and we're responding to it. A perfect world is where we identify an issue, we push out a notice to the rest of the company to say, hey, there's a problem with booking, we're on it, we'll update you in 20 minutes. And hopefully, like the situation Cliff shared, we'll have a fix out for it in an hour, and then tell everyone that we've got the all clear. But ultimately, definition of done is also about trying to live up to those values that we aspire to. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in a little bit and say all of that is accurate. But for me, there are a few things that make me feel comfortable when calling something done. And Chris kind of mentioned all of these, but I just want to put them in like a list, right? The first step for me is, did we break any of our regression tests? Hopefully the answer is no, right? So good, we can deploy it, we can let customers use it. And the next thing is, are we logging events, custom events, or just viewing those LockRocket sessions to make sure our customers are using it? And if the customers are using it and we're logging events, are there any warnings or errors that we need to pay attention to? Sometimes there are like warnings that we may be able to ignore, but some are more important than others, and I think we know that. And then another thing that Chris mentioned is, our customer service agents trained up on that feature, and do they know the difference between a critical and a non-critical bug, right? Like Chris said, a critical bug would get me paged at 2 a.m, and I don't want that. And I also don't want to leave any of our wombats hanging if they were scared to log something and they were worried about if it was a non-critical bug or a critical bug. So those three things: regression tests, are we logging if it's being used, and are our wombats fully trained on it and know how to approach any issues?
Great. No, that was some great detail. We have another question from Jason. So he asked, what Agile framework do you guys use for product development? Scrum, Kanban, something else? And then in the context of whether you have cross-functional teams, or are you guys more groups and silos?
I'll say yes, we use we use a handful of different frameworks. We do have teams that are more akin to like strict Scrum. We have other teams that their workflow just lends themselves to Kanban a little bit more. The easy example I can give, right, is DevOps, which is way more interrupt driven, tends to go Kanban, and it works better for them. Some of the other teams, it's easier to plan with Scrum, so we do that. I will say that we don't dictate from the top down that every team will do things exactly this way. We like to have teams have some flexibility around their process and how they approach this. So it's more about making sure that they're getting what they need out of the process and they're iterating on their process to make sure it works. And then, sorry, the second half of that question. Sorry, go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah, and something to add. Like Chris said, each team can make their own process as long as it works. But an important part of it is making sure that everything that we're working on is represented some way in Jira, right? So you can approach that process any way you want, but make sure that your team and the rest of the organization knows what you're working on, and logging that in Jira. So my team is a Scrum team. We meet once or twice a week. It's simple, and that can change team per team, but make sure your stuff is in Jira.
And then are they cross-functional? Are you guys siloed? Do you guys have specific groups?
Our teams are cross-functional. We have product managers and designers with every team. Each team is a little bit different. Some teams may have their own designer. Other teams may share a designer, that kind of thing. But generally, our teams are cross-functional. I believe DevOps and legal work together quite a bit, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I guess I would add too that our teams tend to be structured around, and I haven't been in a company where these lines are perfectly clean, but they tend to own a set of features. That said, there's no walls between them, right? So Cliff is on the service team, but if there's something broken in the travel team software, Cliff is empowered to go work on that with hopefully some oversight from the travel team. But we try not to have too many strict walls, but we're trying to get to a point where we've got much more clear lines of ownership, and they're getting there. But it's startup life, so there's always some things that kind of float around that don't have clear ownership at this point.
Great. Another question: how do you internally align about the definition of done?
Yeah, so I mean, this was a conversation that started at the management team level, and so at this point we've got 7 different teams right now. Each one of those has a manager that was part of that conversation, and we pulled in a few folks from outside that group as well to come up with a definition in the first place. This is still something we're continuing to roll out, but it's the kind of thing that, we can decide at the management meeting, but it really is about making sure we're living that. And a lot of that has to do with managers working with their team and making sure we're hitting the mark on that. We've put it up on the wiki. We've talked about it in our Slack channel, but that only gets you so far. This is really about the work on the ground of just working with teams, working on projects, thinking through. And I don't think this is something that should be introduced at the beginning of a project, right? Of saying, okay, like, have we thought through all the things that we need to complete when we're going through project planning? So it's really about, it's going to take some time to set in. It's kind of like any other, I look at this as kind of like a value. Any value, you can paint it on the side of the wall in your office, but that's not going to actually change behavior. It's more of a long-term thing where you've got to invest the time. You've got to have managers that are pushing it, people that are advocates for it within the organization.
Another question, do you build your code based on user stories and acceptance criteria? If so, how or who tests these user stories to make sure they are done?
So like we mentioned before, each team kind of works autonomously. So I can just give you an example of what my team does. We do use user stories and acceptance criteria, and our product manager tests them. At the end of the sprint, she'll check the work and make sure that it's operating as expected. Sometimes our designer may have input, maybe we're a pixel or two off, but that happens at the end of the sprint.
I'll add to that too. So Cliff's team is a little bit of a really interesting use case, and the fact that all of his users are within Lola, which is really it can be a really powerful thing when you can really literally talk to every single one of your users. Within other parts of the team, we do use acceptance criteria, and that's been a journey where we're using them more and more. We have a dedicated QE team that is a shared resource effectively across the organization. They are one of the people who's responsible for verifying that those acceptance criteria have been met. And then I would also say that more and more they are part of the people who define those acceptance criteria. The idea is to get QE involved very early and say, let's all come up with an idea of what it means for this to be complete, like what the acceptance criteria are part of definition of done. So have we thought through all the edge cases we need to cover, or have we really pressure tested this idea? QE is a huge part of that.
Great. Another question we have is, so you were touching on continuous deployment earlier and how it led to faster release cycles. Just kind of what specifically has made it faster, and how do you measure faster?
Yeah, so these are things I wish I measured a little bit earlier. I can say, and in my bones, I know that the following statement is true, but I don't have a hard number. But our releases have gotten incredibly faster over the course of the last year. And a lot of that, while I talk a lot about continuous deployment, I mentioned earlier, we have effectively two monoliths, right? So we have these two monolithic applications. We've been moving away from those and moving towards a more service-oriented architecture. So on any major new feature, we have moved away from those monoliths. It makes it a lot easier to build with continuous deployment from the beginning. If anyone's tried to make a large monolith move to continuous deployment after the fact and add all the automated testing and monitoring needed, I'm sure you can all understand how complicated that is. So to some degree, we're moving away from those monoliths. We're not doing this big stop the world rewrite into services, because we don't have the capacity to do that right now, and I think it would be a mistake. So we're moving new feature development into services that can start from the ground up, being smaller, more contained, single purpose services, more isolated from the data perspective, and start, most importantly, like the biggest piece here is start with automated testing from the beginning. If I had to state a goal, and I think we're actually pretty close to it, is that I want to live in a world where when Cliff commits something, or when Cliff merges something to master, it makes it to production in less than an hour and has gone through all the tests. So we can do all that without compromising quality. On our newer services, I think we're faster than that. It varies a little bit because some services are more complicated and have longer running tests. Some services are a bit faster because they're really small. But that's the goal. And I think once we average in with the two monoliths that take, they may take 24 hours to release because we still have a manual QE process for some of that. We're getting close to that hour mark, which is really great. I wish I had hard numbers. It's actually something the DevOps team is working on once they get past our PCI audit this year. But that's the idea, is really to get to the point where we can get that under an hour. And really, the main motivation there, right, aside from quality, is also when something breaks, I want us to be able to move quickly enough that we can afford to break something because it's really quick to fix it. Within reason, there are things that I don't want us to be so fast about, taking credit cards and all that. But we're trying to iterate quickly on a product. We're going to break things from time to time, and we need to be able to fix and respond to them quickly. Continuous deployment is a huge part of that. Or solid testing and high quality release process are really, really a big part of that.
Great. I mean, I think, so one last question, unless there's any others in the chat. Can you guys just go over any kind of other tools that you use in this continuous deployment model?
Yeah. So I'll throw some out there, and then Cliff, please jump in. Cliff is way closer to this than I am. But definitely making big use of Jenkins. We are using a tool called Argo CD that moves things after they've been built in Jenkins, actually moves them to the various environments and gives us good visibility into what is actually running at any given point. We are using a tool called Mabel for front-end end-to-end testing, which has proved to be really great. It feels a lot like Selenium, but way slicker, and with some really interesting add-ons to it that just make it really easy to use and more resilient than historically I've seen Selenium done. So there's those. Cliff, I don't know if you want to jump in on any of the other kind of monitoring and alerting tools we use.
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, there's not much.
I guess the other couple of ones that I would add is we've got Prometheus doing data collection. We've got Grafana sitting on top of that to actually chart things out. And then I'm forgetting the specific tool we're using for actually triggering the alerts right now. It's partially homegrown. So those are the big kind of like 30,000 foot views of it.
Great. Well, Chris, Cliff, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I think that's all we have for questions. Don't see anything else in the chat. So everybody here, you will be getting a follow-up email that will include a recording to this webinar. Again, Chris and Cliff, thanks for the time, and everybody else, thank you for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.